really grateful. And, when I listen to all my predecessors' discussions and talks, I'm humbled by the tremendous amount of knowledge and wealth that it brings to the table. And that really makes this discussion enriching and interesting. I think that at the end of the day, as I always say, we are ultimately the learners for life. I don't believe that 28 years of experience of any that we have achieved in life is one and all. I think we need to sort of treat every second, every moment as a beginning of learning. And that's the philosophy with which, even in the capacity of a Vadhvani Advantage leader of Vadhvani Foundation, and in terms of looking at how to sort of combine the approaches of social objectives of creating employment, which is jobs creation, which we all know is significantly important for any country, more so for the developing country and predominantly for India, as we all know, and combine that element with the approach that we typically adopt successfully in using capitalist principles. And before I come to the specific topic, very quickly in 2 minutes, let me sort of touch upon how it relates to the topic that I'm going to speak on. It's about knowledge, information, finance, and access. And our mission of the foundation is really to provide knowledge to the entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are the ones who are supposed to solve the problems for the society. And they are in solving those problems for the society or ensuring that they create this opportunity at scale. They are basically ensuring that the knowledge results in wealth and well-being. And when we think about that particular objective, and we think about how does it result into the employment, which is a social objective, not only based on what we all know, but we all know that the livelihood is so important for all of us. Whether you are a professor, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are any other sort of job seeker in any other domain, employment is pretty important. And therefore, combining these two really gives me a tremendous energy to sort of talk about this topic, because it's really about ensuring that the entrepreneurs have access to knowledge, they have access to information, they have access to money, which is finance, and through which we are able to bring about a change in the society by creating employment. So I think that's a very sort of quick background and preamble to what I'm going to speak on. So there are two sides to this coin, right? So we are talking about access to knowledge and information and access to finance. And this is a peculiar one, and all of you MSMEs who might be sitting in the audience and policymakers know this very well. But I just thought, let's take a recap of what's happening today in our country, right? We have less than 15% of MSMEs who have access to formal finance. Most of it is informal. There is a 500 billion credit deficit. There are different estimates. Our estimate is 500 billion credit deficit, which is 16% of the nominal GDP we have. On the other hand, we have NPAs that are feared to be ranging anywhere between 8% to 35%. There is no wonder that there is reluctance to fund MSMEs. So on one hand, it's a dichotomy, right? On one hand, you have hunger and need for money. On the other hand, the lenders are reluctant to sort of lend money because they fear that there is a repayment issue. And you know why there is a repayment issue? There is a repayment issue because ability to think about the long-term and short-term, translate that into business plan and a viable sort of proposition wherein you can put in the borrowed money into productive use is a big question. So when I interact with a lot of the lending community, when I interact with MSMEs, they are very clear that they need to service the demand of so much working capital, so much term finance, etc. If you ask them and grill them on what are we going to do with that money and how, prove it to me based on data and facts that money is going to be converted into good money and it will fetch you returns, there are lots of question marks. So most of the MSMEs struggle with actually thinking about how to convince the bankers in terms of how to use that money perfectly. So that's where the catch is. I think that therefore the access becomes, on one hand, access is okay, but access will not be a problem if you have confidence in repayment. So I think that's very important. 80% of the borrowed capital is at high cost, right? Which we all know. And and there is a lot of cost of intermediaries that needs to be brought down significantly. Unless one does that, it will be very tough for somebody to sort of carry that on. If you look at that as a borrowed capital, but on the equity side, 95% of the owners are reluctant to sell equity. And this is very important. If you look at in any developed nation and trace the history of 100 years of progress, there has been an acceptance that you can build business, but selling an equity in business doesn't mean it's a failure. Most of the sale that happens of equity in India today is because of distress sale. It's not necessarily because of higher valuations. And that's something we need to correct, because at the end of the day, you're creating value, your scale creates value, and that value has to be realized by the owners at one point of time. So I think that's one of the important reasons as well. The other key reason of access to finance is poor is because of transparency and visibility. Even today, after the GSTN was conceptualized after many years, we have only 12.8 million tax-paying enterprises out of 63.3, right? So that's a very small percentage. And the moment you come into the tax bracket, you are we all know today that MSME community, by and large, when I talk to people, I mean, we have solved about touched lives of 1,000 MSMEs by now in the last 2 years. We very clearly see this, right? There is a hesitance because there is an anxiety and there is lack of faith that figures data that one shares is going to be used productively. And that hampers the progress because one is not transparent. And one is not transparent, that means the people who are going to lend money or going to give equity are going to be reluctant because we don't know the source of truth. We don't know the source of truth, then it becomes difficult to assess the case and feasibility of repayment. It becomes or the returns, and the moment the capital giver is unclear about the repayment or the returns, that person is not going to sort of give money. So I think it's a vicious circle we need to break. The last 2 points, and the portfolio problem is a big problem, especially, I'll come to that the last, in fact. The battle between socialist capital lenses is also very important. As you see today, whether it is state government or central government, we all know that we need to democratize and we need to help everybody. What I have learned in so far is that it has to be also balanced with a portfolio decision making, which means there are certain areas where India is very good at. It has inherent strengths, and there are certain areas where India could become globally competitive. I think that has to be in alignment with the resource deployment that either private capital does or the government capital does, right? And today I see a problem there. There is a socialist lens and there is also capitalist lens, but both are fighting with each other. Those are not integrated. So I think that hampers the policy development and it results into sort of imbalance. So that's something that needs to be attacked. And finally, at the operation level, I see MSMEs basically lacking stringent project management skills. So for every great strategy, for every great plan, there has to be a great execution. For great execution, one needs to build the management capability of project management, right? It's not about change management, it's about project management, it's about people management. But at the end of the day, the operational excellence that goes hand in hand with what your grand plan is really the proof of success. And that's something which is lacking big time. The final point is the third from the last, which I was going to take up, bad money chasing good money. I suspect, and in one of my articles I have written, that in India you could face two scenarios. One is by 2027, we have a potential to basically contribute to about 40% or 38% of our GDP from the current one level. We also have ability or potential to create 50 million additional jobs. But the second scenario I'm also thinking, and we'll see from the data. So if we don't get it right, then we have a potential to go back to a contribution to even 20% or 18% from the current 30%, and actually witness a massive unemployment figure, right? And we don't want to do that, but I think these are the splintered scenario that I see happening. And that's one of the reasons is that we could actually fall in the credit trap. And the credit trap is all about giving money, but not knowing about the returns and the repayment. And it results into actually bad money resulting in bad money, chasing good money. And then that really erodes the ability of the nation to become competitive globally. So I think these are the different areas that we must focus our attention on when it comes to finance.